Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Saturday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning here, Calgary, Alberta, and I'm happy to be here April 3rd. We're just looking again at the Survivor to Thriver workbook. We were looking at that last night, and it's a great workbook for adult survivors of child abuse, and it's a huge workbook, 115 pages long. We're on page 90 and 91, and so we're getting there, but I've been on this subject now. We've been covering this for about 3 weeks at least, maybe even closer to 4 now. I was thinking about that. But it's so good, it's such good information for people who have suffered through child abuse and have now, walking out their healing process as adults. And it's so important to cover it, and so that's why we're doing this on this show. And so, I'm glad that you can be here. I'm glad you can join in. We're on for half an hour. It's a live streaming internet radio broadcast. I used to take guest call-in phone calls, but I don't anymore because they were all prank calls. And so, I just don't have time for that. So if you want to be on the show, I really encourage people to come on the show. I just don't take calls unless I know who you are. And, if you want to get a hold of me before the show and let me know what your phone number is, then I'll go ahead and bring you on the air because, I always, from the very beginning of my blog talk shows, have encouraged people to phone in and be a part of the show. But then there's just so many prank calls, I just got tired of answering those calls. So it kind of set me off, and then I'd get grumpy, and then, so there you go. So it's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapist certificates. It's not meant to replace professional help. And, I'm just a person who does Blog Talk Radio because I feel like not enough people are talking about child abuse. I know there are some, and thank God for the ones that are. There's not enough people talking about child abuse. It's always been pushed under the carpet. No one wants to deal with it. No one wants to accept the fact that it's happening, and it's happening at a faster rate than ever before, or at least it seems that way. Maybe it's just that more people are reporting it, thank God. But I just want to be one more voice just to say, we need to work on solving the issues and the problems surrounding child abuse so that we can stop child abuse. It's a huge problem in society and always will be until we can get things in place for parents who are having problems, and learn, sort of parents who, because I don't think parents start out with the whole thought, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and abuse my child. That's not what happens. It's something that happens as these children are growing up. Parents, the fact that the parents spin out of control for whatever reason, whether it's economic pressures, they might have mental issues, which my parents did. They might have emotional problems, my parents did. They might have marital problems, my parents did. And they might have anger management problems, my parents did. And they might be abused themselves when they were young, when they were children themselves, and so they're just passing on the cycle, and that's what my parents did. And so I can see that it's just something that happens. Parents don't really start out saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. It just happens. It's unfortunate. It needs to stop because children are dying at the hands of caregivers and parents. And then there's the whole issue of child sexual predators, which just really needs to stop. And that is just, you can keep your children safe if you look out for them. And most of the children that are sexually abused are abused by someone in the home, someone who has access to your child. And so that's a real problem. But there are other child predators, child sexual predators, who will use all kinds of ways to get a hold of your children. So it's very important that you educate yourself, educate your children, educate your family on the issues surrounding child sexual predators, how they get a hold of your kids, how to keep your kids safe, and how to keep yourself safe, right? So important. So I cover all kinds of topics on abuse and abuse-related issues and information. So if the subject makes you uncomfortable, please turn the show off. You have to listen at your own discretion, please, because you know what ultimately is best for you to listen to. So if the topic bothers you, please turn the show off. You won't be hurting my feelings at all. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, please get an adult to listen to this show with you, just to make sure that it's something that you should be listening to, because I fight for child rights, I stand up for child rights, and I think that children have the right to be protected. So if you're a young person under the age of 18, you really should have someone listen to this with you to make sure it's okay for you to listen to it, and also that they could help you with questions if you had questions. The subject of abuse is not covered very often in the world. Nobody wants to talk about it, so it's a very sensitive subject, and it's kind of scary. It can be. And so you might have questions. You might be feeling certain ways after listening to subjects about abuse, right? So you want to get someone to listen to this with you that's older, and maybe they can help you find the information at your library or online, right? So important. So we just want to be safe when we're listening to this. So we're going to cover some more of the Survivor to Thriver workbook this morning. And that you can find that yourself at www.ascasupport.org. And you can, it's a great website, www.asca and then support, SUPPORT.org. The Survivor to Thriver workbook is a free download. They do suggest that you do this in a group setting if you haven't come a long way in your healing. And because it's, if you haven't done a whole lot of work on your healing process yet, they do suggest people have someone with them when they're doing the workbook. It's just a little bit easier that way, just in case you get upset and just need someone to talk to about it. Or, if it triggers something that you didn't think it would, then you have someone there sort of to help you out, right? It's just so important. And the first 34 or 30-something pages is the Safety First chapter. And that's, we went through that already, so we're not going to go through that again today. But they do suggest that you find out if you're even in a safe enough place to go through the workbook. So, you want to make sure that you're in a safe enough place when you're listening to this show, because we're on step 10, page 90, which is quite a ways through the workbook. So you want to make sure that you're far enough along in your healing process to just to listen to this show. And if it starts to bother you, you need to turn it off, okay? So, and then you can come back and listen to all the archives if you really want to. Or you can pull up the Survivor to Thriver workbook, which is right on the website there, and you can go through the Safety First part yourself and make sure you're in a safe enough place just to even do the workbook. So important. So I'm going to do the whole workbook on my own after we're done with maybe later this summer. I've been extremely busy, and at some point I'm going to go through it myself, and it's okay. I feel like I'm okay to go through this myself because I've come so far in my healing. But years ago, I might not have been able to do that. And some people are just in a different place, in their healing. We are all in different, we're in different places in our healing journey, right? Because we're all different. So you want to make sure that you're safe when you're listening to this, and when you're going through the workbook. It's really important. So we're going to start with step 10. We actually did start with that last night. And step 10 is I can control my anger and find healthy outlets for my aggression. And I thought this was so important because I had a lot of anger issues, and I was talking about that last night. So we're not going to completely reread this whole thing, but they were saying that anger may be a natural emotional response to your childhood abuse, but aggression and abusive behavior directed at others repeats old patterns. And they said here, you need to manage these emotions carefully to avoid hurting yourself or someone else. And becoming an abuser would obviously set back your recovery because in so doing, you would undermine the compassion you are developing for the child victim you were and the adult survivor you are. So they said, remember that feelings of anger don't have to be expressed as aggressive or abusive behavior. So I think this is quite interesting. They said that it's a natural response, and aggression is both learned and a product of physiological factors, mostly hormonal. But by aggression, we mean abusive or domineering aggressiveness directed at other people. And they said children often learn from their parents or guardians to respond with aggression towards others during stressful situations. For this reason, many survivors get stuck at this step because their aggression has such a firm hold over them. And they said survivors can learn to respond aggressively to conflict situations very early in life. And this is then reinforced by the relationships they attract and enter into, as well as the influence of an increasingly violent popular culture. So it's quite interesting, this topic. It's page 90 of the Survivor to Thriver workbook. And you can go and pull that right up if you want to and follow along. They have self-help recommendations for this particular step, and also professional help. And we were going through those last night, the self-help. They said regardless of what happened to you as a child, you are always responsible for your actions as an adult. So just as your parents and abusers were responsible for what they did to you years ago. So they said some survivors harbor fantasies about getting revenge or punishment for punishing their abusers for what occurred. But they said it is the one thing you have to if you have these thoughts, and quite another to think about acting on them. So if they wrote here, actually, if you entertain fantasies such as these, you're entering dangerous territory, and we suggest that you seek professional help immediately, because actions taken on such thoughts could constitute criminal acts and subject you to severe penalties, including jail. So we're not, as we were reading through there last night, I was talking about that. I said, if we go and try to vindicate our own abuse by abusing the person who abused us, or hurting the person that abused us, then we are no better than the abuser. And also, we're responsible for our acts, just like our parents were. Our parents were responsible for that abuse, not us. And whoever abused you, the adult in the situation has to take responsibility for that. And so if you're, an adult and you're having problems with anger, and you abuse your own children, you're just as responsible. And if you abuse anyone in your family, then you're just as responsible. It's the way that, that's the whole issue, right? What our parents did was wrong. And so we can't continue that cycle on, and it's so important to not do that. I know a lot of people who were abused don't do that, just for the very reason that they know how much it hurts to be abused as a child. And so, but there are others that do. My mom was like that. My mom was abused as a child, and she took her anger out on us, and some of us more severely than others, but she was still very much an angry woman. She was in a miserable marriage, and my dad, I just don't know what his problem was, because he doesn't talk too much about his parents, but there was something very bizarre going on. I don't quite get, what's going on, because nobody really in their family's talking about it, but there was some real problems, and because he's schizophrenic, and he didn't have any respect for my mom. He had no respect for her. When they were first married, he was very physically abusive towards her, and also, controlling every aspect of her life, health care, money, food, like everything. He had control of it all. And then he went on to say that she was unfaithful towards him, and that none of us kids were his, and he really ruined her life. And so she thought, hey, I'll just ruin his back. And so that's why, they stayed together and just ruined each other's lives, and they ruined our lives too. So it's really unfortunate when that happens. And I think people need to take a good look at their relationships and how they're, if you were abused as a child, don't carry that cycle on. I was actually going to do that without even realizing it in my 30s, and really had to make some real changes in my own, with my own behavior and my behavioral issues, because I was going to carry on what my mom had taught me. And had I not been shown how bad my behavior was, I would have just kept doing it. And so I'm glad that I got to work a lot of that out, but some people haven't, right? So they said here, we left off with number 4 on the self-help. It says, if you are having a very difficult time learning how to control abusive and aggressive behavior, think about joining a focus group or taking a class in parent effectiveness training or nonviolent behavior alternatives. You might be able to find an anger management or other similar educational course that emphasizes expressing anger constructively rather than destructively. And local community mental health services and community colleges may have programs. Check with your employee assistance program at work and your HMO health insurance carrier for possible community listings. And so that's a good idea, to learn how to sort of, control aggressive behavior, abusive behavior, by learning other ways to deal with it, like non-violent behavior alternatives. I think that's just so awesome, and I think everybody should have to take that. I think the whole world should have to go through that course. This is number 5. Learning how to short-circuit your aggression will mean hard work and tailoring behavioral strategies to fit your individual needs. Once you have acquired the necessary behaviors, you will need to practice them so they become instinctive responses and part of your behavioral repertoire. And the professional advice they gave here for this portion is, what kind of aggressive, hostile feelings are activated in your therapy sessions, and what seems to trigger them? Have you discussed this process with your therapist? This is a legitimate topic for your therapy, and your therapist should be able to help you with it without withdrawing needed support from you. And one last word, your therapist is legally required to warn potential victims, and in some cases, to notify law enforcement officials if he or she reasonably believes that you are likely to harm yourself or another person. In such a case, your therapist is permitted to break the confidential relationship between the two of you in the interest of protecting both you and your intended victim. For this reason, as well as his or her interest in your continued growth and well-being, your therapist is not able to support or condone violent actions under any circumstances. And no one should, right? Because that's just the whole issue, right? Our parents, if your parents abused you, or if one parent abused you, or if maybe there was a family member or whoever abused you, then that was wrong, what they did. And we can't condone that behavior. So how can we condone our own violent behavior? That's like living a double standard life. That's what my mom was, She was abused as a child, then she used to cry about it. Oh, I was abused as a child. And then she'd turn around and beat the shit out of me, with a heavy object, and smash my head in. And, really, literally, she could have killed me. And I'm so glad that she didn't. But, there were times that I wish she would have. But the thing is I can't condone what she did. So how can I turn around then and be abusive to somebody else, or to her, or to somebody in my family who abused me, like my dad, for instance? It's not right. We can't condone. We just can't condone any abuse at all, right? Abuse is wrong. So abusive behavior is wrong. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't get what they deserve. Abusers should get what they deserve. They should actually, I'm sad to say, but I think they should all have to do time or do something to have to pay for that. Most of them don't, It's unfortunate. And, it took me so many years. I'm in my 40s now, but it took me, really 40-something years to figure all this out. And it's really quite hard on a person when you grow up spending so much time and so many years in an abusive environment. It just warps the way that you think, because obviously you grow up a certain way, you think a certain way, and then it takes years and years to get over that, to learn and see what normal families are like, to see what normal behavior is like, and so it does take a long, long time. But I think if we reach out and get some professional help, that would just make all the difference. I know I wish that I would have reached out years and years ago, because I would have been in such a better place right now, and even before, it would have not taken me so long to get where I am today. And so I just, I do suggest professional help, absolutely. I wish my brothers would have got professional help. One of my brothers killed himself. He had tried many times to commit suicide, at least 3 that we know about. He might have tried more than that, but we just don't know. But at least 3 times. 3 times he did try to kill himself, and then he'd be saved. But the 3rd time he made it. He was only 33 years old. He was a cocaine addict, but he grew up in the same home I did. So there you go. My other brother died of a drug overdose in a shelter here in Calgary in his 40s. And he had spent his whole entire life using prescription drugs. He was probably 10 or 12 years old when he started doing drugs. And, his whole life was just ruined. He had so many overdoses that his brain was really affected by the drug use and the abuse, right? But he grew up in the same home that I did too. And this is what can happen to people if you don't get help. I was very fortunate to get off the drugs at the age of 21. Seeing my brother commit suicide, I didn't see it, but just having my brother commit suicide really put me in a place that I thought, hey, I might end up there that someday, and I could do that myself. So I need to change my life, And so I stopped doing drugs at the age of 21. Started to really work on myself. It was a long, hard process because I was still living around my abusers, and my mom was still very abusive as far as her attitude went towards life and towards me and towards the family. She was old, but she was still, very much emotionally and psychologically and verbally abusive. She couldn't do much physically anymore. Well, she still probably could have killed me if she wanted to, but I don't think that was her main goal. But the thing is she was just never happy, and right up to the day that she died, she was just a miserable person, and I used to actually feel sorry for her, because I couldn't believe that somebody could live their whole life like that. We used to tell her to leave my dad, get her life together, go out and enjoy her life, but she wouldn't do it. And she wouldn't get help either. She was manic depressive, and she wouldn't go get help, and that's just unfortunate. So we have to get help, We deserve to have a good life. Don't suffer through your whole life like that and end up in your 60s, some burned out, depressed person who's sitting around crying the blues. Because after a while, I actually told her, I said, it's your fault. You should have got help, I said, you could have got help. And she was just like so miserable. She's like, well, I didn't want to have all you kids, And I was like, well, that was your responsibility, and you should have left Dad. That was, So see, she was trying to blame everybody else for her problems. She was always doing that. And instead of taking control of her life and saying, look, this has to change, because I'm just hurting my kids, and I'm hurting myself, and I'm hurting my husband. My husband's hurting me. If the husband wasn't going to straighten up, then she needed to. Somebody needed to straighten up. They both did. But the thing is that's the whole thing. We need to reach out and get help where we can find it. Group support's awesome. If you don't feel like you trust a therapist or a professional help, child abuse survivor groups are a great place to get some help and support, because I know I belong to 2 of them. And the thing is there's people there that can help you, like if you're having a hard time. Lately I haven't been able to even participate because I've been so extremely busy. But the thing is I have days too where I just think, wow, it'd be nice to talk to somebody about what I'm feeling. And these people understand, at least they know similarly what you're going through. And they want everybody to be well because they themselves are trying to heal from a life of abuse. And they know what it's like to hurt and to be in that kind of pain. And so they really want people to be well, and they really are encouraging. I found it very encouraging to belong to those groups because they really want the best for you, just like they want the best for themselves, and they know how hard it is. So it's always I think it's such a great idea just to reach out, make sure you get some help, right? So we'll continue on step 11, which is page 92 of the Survivor to Thriver workbook at www.ascasupport.org. You can bring that up if you're just joining the show. We've got about 10 minutes left. So step 11, I can identify faulty beliefs and distorted perceptions in myself and others. This step is focused on changing the faulty thinking, attitudes, and beliefs about yourself and your past that continue to shape your view of the world. Given that the thoughts and attitudes born of your abuse will never really favor you, it is essential that you learn to challenge the internal tapes that are likely still playing in your head. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's so exactly it, the tapes that just keep playing around and around. I mean, that still kind of happens. Actually, I'm going to have to be honest. It does happen to me actually all the time. All the whole abuse that I took from my mom especially, and some from my dad, plays over and over in my mind, right? But I know how to I know how to deal with it now, whereas before I didn't, and I was very depressed about it. But now it doesn't hurt as bad because I've done quite a lot of healing, right? So, but I'm sure there can be, things that can help, right? It says because their childhood experience has often been extreme, many survivors become victims of their own misconceptions. A few examples of this tendency are: 1, splitting everything into good and bad, or thinking in black and white. Number 2, discrediting the positive aspects of yourself or your efforts. If it isn't perfect, then it's nothing, right? That's the attitude, right? Number 3, magical thinking, or attributing some outcomes to factors that are not relevant. I was born under the wrong stars, so nothing will ever change. This is something someone might think, right? Or I got lucky once doing this, so all I need to do is repeat myself. And number 4, basing conclusions on initial impressions or circumstantial evidence rather than balanced objectivity. In other words, quote unquote, I don't know why I did it. I thought this guy had it in for me. And number 5, personalization, assuming responsibility for something caused by other people or factors. And number 6, magnification and minimization, either making something catastrophically important or excessively diminishing its importance. And there may be other types of distortions that you still fall prey to, and perhaps more out of habit than anything else. And it says, first, familiarize yourself with the patterns that you use and practice identifying them when they occur. Then, using your newly developed self-awareness, stop yourself so that you can short-circuit the patterns before they can do damage to you. Lastly, devise techniques to help you internalize corrected attitudes about yourself. And that's really important, because when you grow up in an abusive home with parents who teach you how to think like that, it's really hard not to think like that, because you're just doing learned behavior. You're just doing what they taught you to do. And I know in my case, my dad was borderline schizophrenic. He still is, I'm sure, because he hasn't really come that far. He's still the same man. He's just 86 years old. But the thing is my mother being manic depressive and my dad being borderline schizophrenic, the two of them were just not a good combination to raise children, right? Because my mom was always depressed, oh, woe is me, I was born under the wrong stars, this life is terrible, everything sucks, everything was a crisis for her. And, well, it was in our home anyway, because it was always a crisis, really, for real. But in her mind, just having all these children and this husband and just being in the situation she was in was a continual crisis, so she was depressed all the time. My dad, he was always the type to think, oh, they're always out to get us. Paranoia would set in. Everything was really bad, like, oh, they're going to come and take away the house. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. So we grew up hearing this, and so we just developed those attitudes too, that life was just horrible and that everyone was out to get us, right? And so when I got older and I got out on my own, I started to actually work on myself with that, because I realized that was a bunch of bogus BS. And I started, because I knew at that point that it was, especially in my 30s, even in my 20s, I knew that it was pretty much just their stupidity that they just pawned off on us, right? And so I had to learn how to change the way I thought about things and really learn to watch what I was thinking. And as soon as I would start thinking something stupid like that, I would just shut it off. And now, my dad is still alive and everything, and I see him doing the same exact things he was doing his whole entire life when I was growing up. And I'm like, I can't even deal with it, because I'm like, you should listen to yourself, Listen to what you're saying. He doesn't have a clue. He thinks that the way he thinks is great. He just has no idea that the way he thinks is very distorted and very warped, but that's because he's schizophrenic, see. So he needed professional help years ago, before we were all born. He probably needed professional help as a child, but never got it. So it's unfortunate. Now he's 86 years old and he's still walking around with the same attitudes and the same distorted life, distorted ways of thinking. So it's unfortunate. That's why I say we have to get help, right? And it says self-help. There's a self-help portion and the actual recommendations for professional help. So we'll read those. Self-help. Read back over your journal and see what distortions in thinking, perceptions, and attitudes you have had about yourself. Notice the obvious patterns. Are there any common themes in these distortions as regards behaviors and feelings? For instance, like if you just think, let's say you just think, oh, I can't do anything. I'm stupid and I'm worthless, right? I'm just using myself as an example. That was a distorted thinking, because that's what my mother told me from the time I was born, that I was just useless, stupid, and that I was worthless, right? And other things, many other things, but we won't go into that. She had me thinking very badly about myself, and so that's something that I could work on if I was just starting out. I could take a look at those distorted thoughts and say, no, I'm not stupid, and I'm worth something, And, you know what I mean? We have to go back and see those distorted thoughts and perceptions that we have about ourselves and change that, because that's so important, right? If people made you feel a certain way in the abuse that you suffered in your childhood, we have to go back and take those distorted thoughts and change them and make them, become honest about it and say, really, was that true? Am I stupid? No, I'm not stupid. You know what I mean? It's like, was I worthless? No, I'm not worthless. We have to do that ourselves, right? And it's better if you have some help to do it. That's what I think. I actually did that on my own, but I would have probably should have had some help to do that. But I actually used to be very much a person with low self-esteem and stuff, especially when I was in my teenage years and high school years and right up into my 20s. But then I started to realize, no, I'm not what she told me I was. You know what I mean? I stopped believing her lies, right? Number 2, the most basic skill for you to learn is the ability to stand back and view events and situations from a broader perspective, so as to become more objective in your perceptions, beliefs, and judgments. That's what I did. I took a look at the whole thing on a big level, right? This skill is essential because this analytical ability is called into play in virtually all aspects of your life. It can make the difference between repeating old habits and choosing new ways of looking at things. And that's why I did it, because I thought, man, I do not want to live a life of hell, because my parents had made life hell for us. And I thought, man, I want to have a good life, so how am I going to do this? I'm going to have to take a look at what they did to us, first of all, and take a look at what they did to each other, and then not repeat it, right? So important. Do not repeat the abuse that your parents did to you, and do not abuse yourself. We have to take care of ourselves. If your parents didn't take care of you, and you didn't get the love and the nurturing and the care and the devotion and just that whole nurturing bond that we needed with our parents when we were children, we have to do that for ourselves. And then we have to learn how to have a good life, right? So this is why it's so important. So we'll continue on with this. We have about a minute left. We'll look at the rest of this at Step 12 tomorrow morning. So, I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm so happy to stand with them. I say that on every show. You can check out their website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, and you can get lots of great information on there regarding child abuse. What is child abuse? All the different kinds of child abuse, signs and symptoms. You can get resources and links there to all kinds of different helpful organizations out there who are doing some great work with people. If you're a parent who's struggling, you can get information there. If you're a parent who thinks maybe I'm abusing my children, you can get help there. It's a great website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com.org. We'll get you there too, and you can learn how to report child abuse. And then you can know that it's really important to report child abuse. You could save a child's life. We could save a child's life. This is so important. Do not assume that a child in a home is going to be happier left in the home. If you suspect abuse, You report it, because you can save a child's life. That child's life and blood will be on your hands if you don't. I'm telling you, and you do not want to have that happen to you. So make sure you make the right decision and report it. Abused children are not happy children. So you would not be breaking up a happy home if the child is being abused, let me tell you. So make the right decision. Make the phone call. So take care, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll be back on tomorrow morning, same time, with the same child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And you're in my thoughts. You're in my prayers. I hope you have a great weekend. Make sure you take care of yourself. If you need something, get a hold of me. And please check out my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption, at lulu.com. Thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in. Bye-bye.